as I was coming out of anesthesia, I could hear my surgeon on the other side of the curtain telling the nurse, I will come speak to her as soon as she's awake, make sure her husband is with her. And that's when I knew.
Today, I'm joined by Laura Behnke, whose journey will challenge how you think about success.
My guest today is Laura Behnke. She's a former New York City sports anchor, speaker, writer, and fellow podcast host.
It takes about 10 years for cancer cells to turn into an actual tumor. And in the meantime, they become a polyp that you can find when you do a colonoscopy. You don't even feel it. There is no downtime. Young people are dying at such a rate because we are not supposed to be screened until 45. And so if you have any questions about what is happening, it needs to be a conversation that you can have with your doctor. We started 2 days after Christmas, just over a year after we lost my dad, and got word finally at the end of January that we had one healthy embryo. And thankfully, that strong little fighter turned into our beautiful daughter. When my daughter was 6 months old, I found myself in that surgeon's office. I had a 7-month-old and I was diagnosed with stage 3B rectal cancer.
What was it like now to get to this doctor who breaks this news to you, and what happens next?
Had I not been pregnant, had I not had my daughter, I would like to go back and redo not telling anybody. But now knowing that I did survive and I am here, I would be afraid to go back and change that too, because I don't know how it would have affected our ability to have our daughter.
Hi, Laura. Welcome to All Over Again podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, Natalie. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
I am so grateful that you accepted my invitation to join. I was am so taken by your profound story, your beautiful, complicated, and an incredibly motivational and inspiring story that I cannot wait for you to share with our listeners. The very first question that I felt moved to ask you was, what gets you out of bed every morning, and what's your why? Because I feel like you are so inspired every time I read something about you or hear something about you. So tell me more about you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You know, that question could have been answered in so many different ways at various points in my life. And I really think now, in this moment, in this chapter, what really gets me out of bed each morning is just the ability to be able to get out of bed, knowing that I can just have a normal, boring day. It doesn't have to be spectacular. There were so many days when when I couldn't get out of bed, when things were felt so dark and felt so forever. You know, when you're going through something really hard, whatever it is, it's so easy to feel like that is just going to be the way it is for the rest of your life, forever and ever. You're so in it because that is what you're living in the moment. Being on the other side of some of these things, just knowing that I can do anything. I can do what I want. I can get up and go work out. For so long, I couldn't even do something that simple. And so it's really the little things right now. Just the ability that I have to be able to get out of bed is what gets me out of bed. And it's a gift. I really enjoy now the ability to live a boring life where I can get it. I've had a lot of not boringness over the last several years. And so it's really nice to just try to kind of settle into just being.
And what's your why?
A little bit of all of that as well. My family, my daughter, my husband, and also conversations like this are so important to me. I spent 16 years as a TV sports anchor and reporter where I was talking predominantly to men about sports, about other people's lives, about other things that were going on. And when I got out of the business, realizing just how tired, no offense, men, how tired I was of talking to men about other people's lives. I was craving connection with other women and sharing the actual realities of our lives and how they go in ways we did not expect, and how we have all of these internalized ideas about how we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be, what our life is supposed to look like. And very often our lives don't look that way. They don't come off that way, which can make us feel like we're doing something wrong. So just having conversations and just sharing our own stories lights me up. It's so important. Anytime a woman reaches out to me and says, I can relate to this so much, it's like, yes, that's why I tell my story. That's why I get into all of the nitty gritty details and take off the mask of perfection and try to be as authentic as possible, because we need each other. We all need each other in an honest and open space so that we can get through life. Because let's be honest, this isn't easy. What we're all going through. We're all going through different things, but it is not easy, and we need each other.
Community is such an invaluable and important everything, quite frankly, to help us feel not alone. And I've noticed that you have created just that through your platform. Can you share a little bit about what you have created since leaving journal or TV journalism and TV reporting? I'm so incredibly in awe with how you speak so easily and profoundly with everyone about all the topics. So tell us a little bit about your platform. It's called The Life Actually.
Yeah. So that's I started back in 2019. I started the Life Actually company, and I had ideas for what I could potentially do with that, and so many pivots and changes in life has happened since then. So I kind of think of it less as a company and more as a community, and it is life actually. There is the life that you thought you would have, and then there is your life actually. And really, it's the actually that holds all the power, that is the most interesting, that can bring so much joy. But first we have to accept it. We have to accept that it wasn't necessarily the way we thought it would go, but that it can still be just as rewarding, maybe even more so, once we let go of all of these ideas about what we have to do. Because, I spent 16 years in TV, and I had this belief during that time: TV will do this to you. It's a difficult business, but I had to be perfect. I had to be perfect in every way. I had to look perfect. I had to dress perfectly. My makeup had to be perfect. I could never make a mistake. And, we're humans. We all make mistakes, but being a woman in sports, I lived in constant fear of mispronouncing a name or just saying the wrong thing, because we all do that. No matter how knowledgeable we are about a subject, we're going to screw up sometimes. We're going to say the wrong thing. And I lived in fear of that, because I thought, oh my God, then I'm not perfect. Then I'm not going to make it. Then I'm not going to be okay at this job. People aren't going to respect me. People aren't going to trust me. And I built up this wall of perfection. And when I left the business, I did not fully realize how high that wall is and how thick that wall was until I was out of it, until I kind of went back to the other side of it, and this weight lifted off of my shoulders, and I could finally feel comfortable being me. And the way the life actually really kind of came about is because the entire time I was in TV, I had this secret that I was so worried about people finding out. I mean, only my family, my close friends knew this. None of my coworkers did. I lived in fear that viewers would find out. I mean, I was judged enough already as a woman in sports. I did not need this to be tacked onto it. But my truth, my secret was that I was not only single, but I'd never been in a relationship. I was in my 30s and I had never been in a relationship. And I was convinced there was something wrong with me, and I was convinced that if people knew about this, then that they would completely judge me and nobody could take me seriously. I mean, as a society, if we want to insult someone, we tend to go straight to their romantic possibilities. Oh, well, no wonder they're single, or that person could never get laid, or we use it all the time. And because of my reality was never having had a relationship, I did not want to open the door to any of those accusations or just that belittlement. And so I was convinced at that point that I had to be the only 35-year-old woman who'd never been in a relationship. That there was something absolutely wrong with me. I had to keep that to myself. And it wasn't until I ended up meeting my husband, my now husband, when I was 35 and a half. And he was my first relationship. Obviously it worked because we are married and have been together for over 10 years now. But I left TV and all of a sudden I did not have a camera on me all the time. I did not have, a newsroom to answer to. I didn't have bosses who were sitting in their corner offices making all these decisions and frankly judging all of us. And I didn't have to worry about what they thought. And I could just be me. And I started talking with some younger women. My husband had just started a job at a company that had a lot of like younger millennials that were working there. And I started talking to a bunch of them and they would ask about planning the wedding. And then we started talking about dating in New York. I was in New York City at the time. And prior to meeting my husband, I started sharing. I started sharing the realities and my truth and just seeing their eyes like, oh my gosh, maybe they didn't have the exact same story, but they could relate to something. Suddenly, this thing that I thought made me so unique and was so terrible was only unique and terrible because I wasn't talking about it and I didn't realize how many other people had similar feelings or even similar experiences. And that got me thinking like, okay, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm supposed to be talking about the actual experiences, the things that I needed somebody to talk to me about when I was going through it, but there was nobody there. Maybe I need to be that person. And that's how it started. I started talking about my single life and started writing articles. I was trying to be a fashion influencer at the time. I wasn't very good at it, but I was good at writing about my own experiences, which I would put on my fashion blog. I would have, occasionally put in these stories from my dating life and my single life, and they were resonating with people far more than any outfit I was wearing. And I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe maybe this is the direction I should be going in. And that led to the idea of Life Actually. And since thinking that being single until I was 35 was like the biggest challenge I would ever face, there have been many more that have come up since then, which has just kind of opened the door to even more like real, authentic conversations that are so important and so needed right now.
And I remember thinking, okay, it's because she was dating and she didn't find somebody she wanted to be in a relationship with, because I'm looking at you thinking, oh, successful, beautiful, like smart. It was her choice. And also thinking it was, again, your choice, knowing I had to be. It's like, oh, she was just really invested in her career. That's what was happening, because she probably was never in New York City. It was amazing because I started thinking like there's no possible way. And it's so interesting because I would never have reflected on it the way that you were self-reflecting on it. It almost sounds like you felt, shame associated with it. Whereas I thought like, wow, empowered. She's too busy for that shit. Like that's what I thought, reading that, especially for the first time. So
yeah. And that's what I tried. That's what I tried to tell people.
I mean, well, like I loved that story, and that's what I was definitely, picking up that vibe. Like I would have never known that. I mean, it's not a matter of like, why were you not in a relationship? You were so busy in this other element. It was almost like you were dating your job. No, like how did you even have time to date? I just, that was my takeaway from it. So you meet your now husband and you're ready to sail off into the sunset and have this happy, fairy tale life that you're supposed to have after this illustrious career in broadcast TV journalism. And quite frankly, you're still in it, right? You're still in it when you first meet your husband. The hits just start coming. And that was just what struck me. Like you didn't catch a break. I mean, you had adversity after adversity after adversity. And the way that you are handling it now and communicating about it and helping other people feel seen and sharing your light is so inspiring. Can you take us through the journey of what happened next after you met your now husband?
I want to point out too that I thought in all these years that I was single, and did not want to be. I kept, there's only so long I could keep telling myself, oh, it's just because my job is so demanding, which it was. It was very demanding. But honestly, I would have dropped it all. That is how badly I wanted to be with somebody. And I am just so grateful that none of the guys I dated, like went on a couple of dates with at that time, took me up on that offer, because none of them were my person. And it would have sent my life in a very different direction. So all I wanted, though, I truly had this idea in my head that meeting that person that I was going to marry and hopefully start a family with, that was what all the hard work was for. Once I got that, I was smooth sailing. Like everything in my life would click from there. My whole future that I envisioned all was based around meeting him. And then everything went from there. So when I finally did, I was like, okay, well, great. Here we go. This is what I've been waiting for. The hard part truly has to be over. We got married on a beautiful beach in Mexico in May of 2018. And 2 weeks after our wedding, we found out that my father-in-law, my husband's from England. So we found out my father-in-law over in the UK had been diagnosed with cancer. And then less than a month later, we found out that my dad had been diagnosed with cancer as well. It turns out that both of them had been quite sick, not feeling well at all at our wedding. They both put on the most brave face possible and were there for us and just absolutely incredible in that moment and for that week. But both of them were in a lot of pain, but we did not know why for either of them. And within 6 weeks, we would have both of them with their own cancer diagnosis. And my dad had a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. He was diagnosed at stage 4. So we knew we were in for a lot, but we had hoped that with treatment, he would be able to live with it for many years. And, same with my father-in-law. We were optimistic that he would respond to treatment and things would go well. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. And we lost my father-in-law just over a year after his diagnosis in the summer of 2019. And while we were in England, on the day of his funeral, we found out that my parents back home in Minnesota, that my dad had met with his oncologist, and they found out that none of the treatment was working anymore. It was not helping in any way. And so at that point, we needed to move into helping with his quality of life for as long as he had left. So we came home from England after saying goodbye to my father-in-law, and immediately I started going home. We were still in New York City, so I continued to go home to Minnesota every few weeks, helping my parents as my dad went through chemo, just to try to help his quality of life. And that lasted for a few months before it just wasn't helping at all. It was making everything even worse. So he went into hospice care in December of 2019, and I went home for several weeks just to be there in the end to help my mom and to be there with my dad. And we lost my dad on Christmas morning, 2019. And it was, as our hospice social worker said, it was layered grief. We had just lost someone so important just a few months prior, and then my dad on top of it. And we were struggling. We were struggling a lot, obviously. Both of us were very close to our fathers, and losing them was huge. And I I remember thinking on New Year's Eve of 2019, going into a new year, my husband and I, we looked at each other and were like, nothing could be worse
Oh
than
my
this
God.
year we just had. Like nothing could be worse than 2019, right? And what happened at the beginning of 2020? We
Yep.
had a
Don't,
pandemic.
can't.
And at the beginning of 2020, we, losing our fathers that quickly, like we did, really just solidified with me, like if we want to start a family, we had to put it off while we were dealing with their illnesses. But I was like, we cannot do that anymore. Like life is short. We have no idea what's going to happen. And it was so important to me that we begin trying to have our family now. At this point, I was 40. And my husband has a genetic condition, and we were going to need to be able to do genetic testing so that we could eliminate the potential of passing on what he has to a child. So we knew IVF was going to be our option. And we finally, after losing our dads and still grieving, we were ready to we had the time to be able to invest in starting that process. And so we did. We were starting it. We were all set to go. Our first round was set to begin. It was timed up with my cycle. We were all ready to go for March 17th, 2020. And on March 16th, 2020 is when all IVF clinics around the country shut down because they were considered not medically
Essential.
necessary. So we had it all just come to a halt and we had to wait. And like I said, I'm 40 at this point. And so I'm just sitting there, we're stuck in lockdown. There's nothing that you can focus on at that point except your own thoughts, really. And I just was like, okay, every single day that goes by, I'm getting older. I worry about my egg quality. I worry about our potential for success. Like, this pandemic going to keep us from ever being able to have a child? It was terrifying. And we ended up having to wait a few months. Finally, at the end of May, we were able to begin our first round. And I entered IVF so naively. I was just had this idea. And I think so many people do until you go through it. Oh, well, IVF will fix it. That'll be fine. That's your solution. That's going to work. You're going to be fine. And my husband had a 50% chance of passing down his condition. So in my head, I still was thinking that's our only problem. So, hey, as long as we get 2 embryos, one of them's going to be okay, right? The odds say that we have a 50% chance. I had not taken into consideration the quality of my eggs and how much that could play a role in everything. So we went through our first round, and during that time, we also made plans to move to the San Francisco Bay Area and leave New York City. So our first round was done in New York, but it was while we were in the process of moving. We're actually at home with my mom in Minnesota when we found out that there were no healthy embryos from our first round. So we made the move to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. We settled into our house, the house that we had bought, specifically pointing out, well, that room will be the nursery. This is, how we will do everything. And the nursery is my husband's office now, because I was like, we cannot, we cannot have that room just sitting there waiting for something that might never happen. So we found a new fertility clinic in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and we did a second round. Also, no healthy embryos. And then we did a third round and no healthy embryos. So 3 failed rounds. And we were at the end of 2020 at this point and just did not know if we could keep going, both financially, but also for our own mental health. IVF is physically demanding for the woman, but it is mentally and emotionally devastating for both people involved. It is just every single step in the process has a weight, and you are just living for the next results. And it is agonizing. It's really, really difficult.
You're at the mercy of the process.
You are. Yep, you are. And because we needed to do the regular genetic testing as well, but we also had a specific test that was made at a lab, specifically for my husband's condition. Like, we had to send in DNA swabs, and even his mom had to contribute one, so that they could create from scratch this test just for this one genetic abnormality. So we had to go through the regular genetic testing and then that on top of it. So it was always a few weeks of a wait to get those results back. And always the results were disappointing. But we finally decided to do one more, and this would be it. No matter what, we decided this was it. Either we're going to have a child, or we need to begin the process of building our lives without one. Like, we have to give ourselves permission to kind of move into that phase of life if this is not going to work out. So we did one final round. We started 2 days after Christmas in 2020. So just, just over a year after we lost my dad, and got word finally at the end of January that we had one healthy embryo. And thankfully that strong little fighter turned into our beautiful daughter. And so I was pregnant at 41. And I actually had the baby at 42. But right before, so here, this is it, right? We've been through so much. Finally, we have our baby. This has to be that happy ending that I've been looking for so long.
But also, do you feel like it was some sort of divine intervention? Like, I'm listening to your story and I'm hearing, okay, so you're father passes on Christmas Day the year before. You do your, last transfer around Christmas time, and this one takes there's something miraculous, right, about IVF in the first place, right? Yes, it's science. It's it's also love, and it's also, I don't know, something else. Like we call it God. You've had this experience where it was almost a year after your dad, passed, and then now you have this baby. Do you feel like there was some sort of some intervention? Your dad was your angel sitting on your shoulder. I know this sounds insane, but I mean, do you think he was up there like helping a little bit? Like that sounds insane perhaps, but do you ever think about that?
It's a good question. I was having a conversation on a different podcast recently, and she brought up the same thing. And it's funny because when I was in it, no, that never ever crossed my mind. I was so in the process, and I was, his anniversary of his passing came up, and I was just in so much pain because of that. And I was in so much pain because we had found out at the beginning of December that the third round had not worked, and there were just, I was not in a good place. I could not come up with all of that. But my daughter ended up being born on December 16th of 2021. So less than a week before the 2-year anniversary of his passing. So all these things happening around Christmas is kind of wild. When I think about it now, I cannot say that I really gave myself the chance to think about it much at the time. My dad did not believe in God. My dad was one of those who, like, we always joked about it that, he figured once he died, that's it. We're done. Like there's nothing there. You're just done. And he was so stubborn about these things that we have joked that, if he did realize that there is, a heaven or as some version of an afterlife, and he had the ability to, be on our shoulder, do all of that, that he would be like, no, I said that this wasn't a thing, so I'm not going to do it. But, I don't know. I do not know. The ties are all kind of amazing when you look at it this way. But I would like to think so, because one of the hardest things about finally having our daughter was knowing that neither of our dads knew about her. Not only that they didn't get to meet her, but they didn't even know that she was going to happen. And so I do like to think that all these little tie-ins do mean that he knows, and that she has an extra person too, actually, looking out for her.
I love that the angels are watching. I mean, I find that to be so fascinating. You're sharing the story, and I'm like, December keeps popping up. It's an impressive, just correlation.
Yeah, it is. Well, and so right before our transfer, which was in March, I noticed for the first time that I had bleeding, and when I went to the bathroom, and I was shocked. I mean, as you should be. You never want to see bleeding where, it's unexpected and it shouldn't be, and you can't explain it. But we were literally days away from the transfer. And so I was so focused on that. My main goal, the only thing I cared about was getting pregnant. And I figured, because I had just been through, a year almost of hormones and so much stress and so much grief, that it had to be hemorrhoids. I had to have aggravated my hemorrhoid somehow, even though I had never had hemorrhoid issues before. So I didn't even really know what they were supposed to be like. I convinced myself that has to be what this is. So let's just not worry about it. Maybe relax, don't strain, just, let's try and fix this ourselves. And it's fine. It's just hemorrhoids. So we went through with the transfer. I got pregnant, and the bleeding went away. So I was like, yeah,
And you
that's
never
exactly
said
what it was.
anything.
It had to have been that.
You've never said anything.
I didn't at that time. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I did not, because like I said, I was so focused on getting pregnant. I did not want anything to derail it.
Sure.
And even then, I assumed it was nothing because isn't that what we usually do? We assume, okay, this can't really be a big deal. I'm sure this is okay. Even though I really did believe it was probably fine, I did not want to waste any time that it would take to find out for sure that it was okay. I needed to get pregnant now. I needed to know that we were going to have a baby. So that was it. I did not mention it. I didn't even mention it to my husband. And the bleeding went away. And it wasn't until then my second trimester, so 3 months later, that it started again. And at this point now I'm pregnant and I'm in my second trimester. And what do you read about all the time with pregnancy and especially second trimester? Oh, this is when hemorrhoids will happen. And you're told to expect that. And so I was like, oh, well, obviously this is hemorrhoids. Okay. So that's what it's been the whole time. It's just hemorrhoids. And so I went through second trimester, had very consistent bleeding, which is not what hemorrhoids is like. But I did not know that at the time. And I was just convinced that's what I was going through. And then in the third trimester, thankfully, I never, ever would have thought that I would be grateful for this, but I had an actual hemorrhoid flare up. And it was unlike anything that I had experienced before, which should have also tipped me off that what I'd been dealing with previously was not hemorrhoids, but we tell ourselves the things that we want to hear. And so I had an actual hemorrhoid flare up. It was very painful, very uncomfortable, needed to be treated with, over the counter creams. And during that time, I developed an external hemorrhoid and I hated that thing. I was so embarrassed by it. I was pretty much convinced at that time that that was like the worst thing that could happen was that I had this external hemorrhoid. And I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't want to tell anybody. I was so worried that even my doctor and my midwife, my doula, like would be grossed out by this. And spoiler alert, they weren't. It's just, these things happen, but I was so embarrassed by it. And I'm so grateful at this point now that I was so embarrassed by it because all I wanted was for it to be gone. So even after my hemorrhoid flare up was under control, I still had the bleeding. But I had this external hemorrhoid. So in my mind, I had convinced myself that because I had this hemorrhoid, that had to still be bleeding. And again, that's not how hemorrhoids typically work. So, my midwife at that point we were all optimistic that once I had the baby, that these things would kind of resolve themselves and I would be okay. After I had my daughter, that was not the case. And the hemorrhoid was still there. And the bleeding was as well. And my new OB who had delivered my daughter told me at my 3-week checkup, because I ended up having to have a C-section, told me at the 3-week checkup, she's like, no, that thing's not going away. I hate to tell you, the only way to get rid of it is to have it surgically removed. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot even think about that right now. I have a 3-week-old. I'm exhausted. I am like scared that I'm going to break her. I am dealing with like the emotions of, going from 42 years of my life not having a child to now all of a sudden having one. And there was a lot of grieving the life that I used to have. It did not matter how wanted she was. It was a jarring experience to become a parent. And so dealing with all of that, I'm like, okay, I will deal with this hemorrhoid later. I do not have the mental capacity to figure out a surgeon and then the pain of having it removed. Like this is a later problem. I will deal with this down the road. And then in May, my daughter was 5 months old. I finally had my annual appointment with my general practice doctor. And I was like, well, this is when I should probably get the ball rolling. So I explained to her my issues and what was going on and that I wanted it removed. I did not realize at the time just how little doctors who are not specializing in colorectal health, how little they actually know about colorectal health. So my general practice doctor did not follow up with a ton of questions about the bleeding. She just, like me, assumed it was the hemorrhoid. And so she referred me to a surgeon to have it removed. And so the only reason when my daughter was 6 months old, the only reason that I found myself in that surgeon's office was because I wanted the hemorrhoid removed. Even though the bleeding was getting worse, even though it had been persistent now for months, I just wanted the hemorrhoid removed. And thankfully, I ended up in the right person's office.
Are you finally at this point, like, you finally ended up getting an answer and a diagnosis? And I'm like on the edge of my seat now because I'm like, holy shit. Like, what was it like now to get to this doctor who breaks this news to you? And what happens next? Like, what went through your head?
Well, I mean, it's wild because I sat down in that office, in that exam room, still thinking we were there for a consult to remove a hemorrhoid. And thankfully, she knows what she's doing and knows a lot more about hemorrhoids and colorectal health than I do. And so she was like, hold on here. I need you to tell me a little bit more about the bleeding. And then she starts asking other questions. And, I did not, the only symptom I had was rectal bleeding. That was really the only tangible symptom that I had. The other things that people will talk about is unexplained weight loss, fatigue, bowel issues, changes in your bowel habits. I was postpartum. So it is almost impossible to know if the things that I was experiencing were a result of postpartum and having been pregnant, or if they were symptoms of the cancer, because I was losing weight. I was postpartum. I was supposed to be losing weight. I did have some unexplained bowel habits, not a lot. Like I had some urgency to go at times. But again, I had just carried a baby for almost 10 months. And now my body was trying to bounce back. And like all of that seemed very normal and explainable. But thankfully, my surgeon, knows way more than I do. So she said, you know what? I'm going to do an exam right here in the office. They can do a hemorrhoid exam right there. So she just did a little exam right there. I'm still chatting away about, she had a baby that was just a couple months younger than mine. And so I was just chatting away about babies and getting this hemorrhoid removed and still completely like unaware of what we were dealing with. And I didn't even have my pants zipped up. And after the exam, and she was like, yeah, the bleeding is not coming from your hemorrhoids. And I'm going, what? I'm sorry, wait, what? But even then, I'm like, oh, well, that's weird. Okay, cool. And she said, I am seeing some bloody mucus. I'm like, that's what it is. That's what my bleeding is. It's bloody mucus. Okay. Hemorrhoids are not bloody mucus. Like that is not hemorrhoid bleeding. So she said, you need to have a colonoscopy immediately. And even then I was like, well, what about removing the hemorrhoid? She's like, we can remove the hemorrhoid at any time. You need a colonoscopy right now. And I'm like, okay, but it still wasn't hitting home. So all I had heard about was how difficult colonoscopies can be and how hard the prep is. And so I'm asking her all these questions. She's preparing me for what I'm going to need to do and what it's going to look like and all of that. And it wasn't until she was like on her way out the door. I think she maybe even had her hand on the doorknob. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait, should I be concerned? And she stopped and she came back into the room fully. And she said, it could be a lot of things other than cancer, but we need a colonoscopy to know for sure. And that was the first time the C word was thrown out. And I still did not believe that could be me. I had just been pregnant. And prior to that, I had been doing IVF. I had been getting blood draws consistently for almost 2 years. How could they have missed cancer? How could I have been growing a perfectly healthy baby in a perfectly healthy pregnancy and have had cancer the entire time? Like there did not seem a
Mind
world
blowing.
in which that was possible. As it turns out, you can get all the blood draws in the world, but if they're not looking for the right things or the specific things that you might need, it's not going to come up. I was perfectly healthy other than the fact that I had rectal cancer. So we ended up having the colonoscopy. I had to wait a month because we had a trip planned to the UK, and we literally left a couple of days later. It was our first time seeing my husband's family since the pandemic and the first time that they were meeting our daughter. And so I had my colonoscopy about a month after that initial meeting. And I should have known because my surgeon actually opened up a day on her calendar that because she was fully booked with colonoscopies, she opened up a day and went to a facility she has never worked out of before because they had availability so she could do my colonoscopy.
Wow.
That should have told me something of how important this was. But, we tell ourselves what we want to hear. And I was trying to explain away everything, even in that moment. So I went in for the colonoscopy on a Friday afternoon in California, and I wake up. And as I was coming out of anesthesia, I could hear my surgeon on the other side of the curtain telling the nurse, I will come speak to her as soon as she's awake. Make sure her husband is with her. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew. My husband didn't need to be there for her to tell me everything was fine. So I started crying like, I know I have cancer. Meanwhile, my husband's sitting out in the waiting room, and he is seeing all of these nurses come rushing out to the office staff, ordering tests, needing them to make calls to insurance companies, all of these things for a patient stat. And that's when he knew. He knew that had to be me. And so about 20, 30 minutes later, the two of us were sitting together, and my surgeon came in and said, we found a mass and it looks like cancer. And what I did not realize at the time, I quickly did, is that doctors, surgeons do not throw around the word cancer unless they have pretty much complete confidence that is what it is. And the incredible thing about colonoscopies is that they are such an amazing prevention and tool to see what is actually going on. Like, she was able to show me. I had a color picture of my tumor because they send a camera that she could see it all. So she obviously knew. She knew it was cancer. And so both of us are crying. My husband and I are crying, and I just remember wailing into his shoulder. But we have a 7-month-old, and as I said, it was California in the afternoon on a Friday. Our insurance company was out on the East Coast. Everything was pretty much closed up by the time we knew what we were dealing with. And we couldn't get any answers until the following Monday morning. So we had to sit there for the weekend. And that was just over 48 hours of me being pretty much convinced that I was going to die.
Well, what
In
was the
my past
prognosis?
experience with cancer, people don't live.
Well,
Well,
so
we didn't know at that point. So we
Okay.
had to wait. We had to wait until the next week. And then I had scans. I had an MRI, had CT scans. They can't give you an actual prognosis or a stage until they see what we're dealing with. We knew I had a tumor and we knew it was big, but we did not know how far cancer cells potentially could have gone. So by the end of the following week, we knew that that my tumor had broken through the rectum wall, and that it was in some of the nearby lymph nodes. So I was diagnosed with stage 3B rectal cancer, which means that it was in lymph nodes. But thankfully, it was not stage 4. Stage 4 would mean that it was in other organs. And stage 4 is highly difficult to treat. The survival rates of 5 years for stage 3 versus stage 4 are like staggeringly different. So I was very, very fortunate that we got it at stage 3. And who knows how much longer I could have sat there telling myself it was just hemorrhoids before we would have been in a very, very different situation by the time I was diagnosed. So yes, I had a 7-month-old and I was diagnosed with stage 3B rectal cancer.
What's next? Like, what does your doctor tell you the prognosis of that is? And how do you emotionally handle something like that? Or did you just go into fight or flight mode? Like, what happens next? And you have a baby.
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything. I mean, that first weekend before we had answers, I was convinced that I was going to die. And I was just devastated that I was going to leave behind my daughter and my husband. And my husband was like, he was mad at me in a way. I mean, not really, but he was mad. Like, we had gone through so much. I had just had this baby, and now I was going to leave him with the baby. And, it was so many emotions. Also, I'm only 7 months postpartum. Like, there are still so many hormones and regular old emotions that you're dealing with at that stage. And throwing this in was terrifying. I have never been so scared in my life for very good reason. It wasn't until that whole next week then was tests and was finding out the stage. And then once we had the stage figured out and we knew exactly what we were dealing with, then they were able to assemble my care team and come up with a plan of attack. And so the following Monday or Tuesday, it was, I think Monday, I think we met with my radiation oncologist because we determined that the first step would be radiation, the second step would be chemotherapy, and then the third would be surgery. So we met with my radiation oncologist, and he was the first. We met with my oncologist then later in the week. So he was our first step into oncology, and he sat down with us and laid it all out. And he said, with this stage and with this treatment plan and your age, we fully expect, like, our only goal here is remission, is full recovery. We are not just looking for you to get through this. You're going to be cured. And so at that point, I was like, okay, this is going to be terrible. The next several months are going to be terrible, but I am going to survive. And my husband and I were in the car driving home from that. And he said to me, well, I guess you're going to be able to add cancer survivor to your list to your resume, to your list of titles. And that was the first time that I was like, holy shit. Okay. Oh my God. Like, wow, there is so much ahead of us right now to get to that point. But yeah, that is the only option. We are coming out on the other side of this. So I ended up beginning radiation. I had 5 weeks of radiation, 25 days of radiation. It's every single day, Monday through Friday. Did that for 5 weeks. That started in mid-August. So it was a month to the day after I was actually diagnosed. And we were very, very fortunate that, when we moved out here, my mom, who was in Minnesota, since we'd lost my dad, there was nothing keeping her in Minnesota. So she moved out to California a few months after we did. And thank goodness moved 15 minutes from where my husband and I live. And, my brother's out here too. He's in a different part of the Bay Area, and she was trying to decide which part she should live in. And she liked the area more where we were. And so thankfully she ended up choosing where we were, and having no idea that she would essentially be like, she got to the point where each morning her phone would tell her, oh, it's, directions to work. And it was our house because that's how often she was coming to help with the baby. And, so we started with the radiation. After the 5 weeks of radiation, I began 5 cycles of chemotherapy over 15 weeks. So I was doing chemotherapy pills, and I had an infusion every 3 weeks, and did that. My final infusion was December 23rd. So here we are back to December 23rd, 2022. And I finished with chemotherapy then because I was still on the pills for 2 weeks. And I finished with my last cycle of chemo at the beginning of January 2023. And then my first surgery was scheduled for February 10th, 2023. So I was so fortunate that I had a full response to the treatment. So we had to go through and do all the scans again after I finished chemo, just so that before they went into surgery, we knew what we were dealing with. And all of the scans showed no evidence of disease. So the radiation and chemotherapy did their job. They worked. And actually, even before we had our scans, I had to go back into my surgeon's office as kind of like a prep before the surgery. And she did what's called a flexible sigmoidoscopy, which is something they can do just right there in the office. But it's kind of the beginning of a colonoscopy. You can get through the rectum and then just to the very base of the colon. And so she did that in the office, and this is just one of those things that just sticks with you that I will never forget. I could watch. I'm awake for all of this. A colonoscopy, you're not awake for most of the time, but I was awake for this, and so I could watch on the TV as she has the camera going in, and so I'm watching, not really knowing what I'm looking at, and it's just a lot of pink, and all of a sudden she says, "So yeah, this is where your tumor used to be," and
That must have made you
it's
feel
like,
so good. The
oh,
words "used to be."
oh, okay. Well, but in true in true surgeon form, surgeons are bless them. Like the work they do is incredible, but they are most of the in my experience are so focused on that work that they do that sometimes they miss the human element. So she just said, "Yeah, this is where your tumor used to be." And then we just moved on, and she just, acting like, "Oh, yes, and so, this the sky is blue," and just moving on. She left the office, and I just started crying then. I'm like, "Oh my god, like, did that just happen?" That is where my tumor used to be. So then we got the scans after that indeed showed that there was no evidence of disease, which was great, obviously. And but we decided to do the surgery anyway as a precautionary measure so that we could remove everything that had originally had cancer cells, so that if there happened to be something there like that you couldn't see right now but that was still there, that it would be gone. So I had my low anterior resection surgery, which was removing half of my rectum, the bottom part of my colon. They reconnected the two. They also removed 17 lymph nodes. And then I had to have, because that area, it is so important that area heals properly and then that connection does not leak and you don't have any issues. So to ensure that we would be okay, I had a temporary ileostomy bag for 7 weeks. And then I had the ileostomy reversal. And then that was the beginning of what ended up being the hardest part of my whole cancer experience. I thought radiation and chemo were bad, but the side effects of that surgery, and then because when I had the bag, everything was fine. Like the ostomy bags make sure that your stool is diverted from actually going out the normal way, and in order to bypass the colon, in my case, and the rectum, I had a bag, so my colon wasn't working. My rectum wasn't working. And then once we reversed it, now they were working, and they were working without two, vital chunks that had always been there. And that's not an easy thing for the body to just magically deal with right away. So I had the first weeks were really difficult. The first months were really difficult. Nearly 3 months, 3 years out now, I am much improved. I can accept my new normal now and live with that, but I will never be the same. I will never be the way that I was before surgery. But I continue to show no evidence of disease, and so it was all worth it.
Wow, that is quite a story. I mean, that is quite an experience that you've had. I mean, I'm so glad you're cancer free. And it sounds like there is a lot of evidence showing that you're in full remission. There will not be another resurgence, right? Do we, or is there concern for
Hopefully,
that?
hopefully.
Okay.
So the first 5 years after are the most critical, and
Okay.
so I have very regular, check-ins with my oncologist. The first 2 years are the most sensitive, so I was meeting with my oncologist every 3 months and getting a CT scan every 6 months. Once I hit the 2-year mark last year, I kind of graduated to the next level of surveillance, and so I now see my oncologist every 6 months, but I still get a scan every 6 months, and I actually have my next scan, coming up in a couple of weeks, and, at 5 years then, that's the real danger of recurrence. The odds start to go down much more. So once you hit 5 years, you kind of graduate from seeing your oncologist, unless there's some reason to keep monitoring. But I'm doing very well. It's as a survivor, you never take anything for granted. So I have no idea what the future holds. I am very optimistic that it will not come back, but We don't know. The good thing about colorectal cancer is that it is highly preventable from getting advanced with regular colonoscopies. And I get a colonoscopy now every 3 years. I will for the foreseeable future. So they'll catch anything new. The only scary part is if there were trace cells that were unidentified that maybe would end up somewhere else. That's the biggest fear at this point. But so far, we seem to be in a good place.
It's amazing how we don't talk enough about colorectal and rectal cancer in general. Like, I don't really know all that much about it, and I hadn't known much about it until I started, listening to your story. I've heard some stories of friends who have also had colorectal cancer. But even then, outside of go and get a colonoscopy, what do you want women to know about colorectal cancer and rectal cancer? And can you please also share the differences between the two and why it's so important to differentiate between the two?
Well, so colorectal is lumped together because it's obviously very close in proximity to each other. The colon is connected to the rectum, and so it's easy to put the two together. Treatments can be similar, but the effects can be a little bit different depending on where it is. Also, colorectal is easily lumped together because a colonoscopy covers both. A colonoscopy will take the little camera all the way up through the rectum, through the colon, all the way to the end. And so that's how you can check everything out, which is why they're colorectal surgeons and it's colorectal health, and it's not necessarily broken up that way. The biggest issue, because these numbers just came out very recently, that now the colorectal cancer is the largest cancer killer in men and women under 50. So more than breast cancer for women, it is colorectal cancer. And a huge reason for that, I believe, is that we have such a stigma about talking about poop, about talking about that part of our body, about talking about these completely normal bodily functions that we are kind of supposed to, especially as women, kind of supposed to pretend we don't do. And it's not pretty, it's not a fun conversation, but the way that you can likely prevent late stage colorectal cancer is simply by talking to your doctor about your bowel habits. If anything changes, and the biggest indicator is blood. If you ever have rectal bleeding, there is no rectal bleeding that is okay. Even if it's hemorrhoids, that go and tell a doctor, get it checked out. If it is hemorrhoids, cool. It's just hemorrhoids. And I say just because hemorrhoids can be a real issue for people. It's not cancer, but you could still get help for that. You can still get peace of mind of knowing what it is. And if it is something else, you will hopefully find out early, because the reason that number is so high, why so many people under the age of 50 will die of colorectal cancer, is because by the time you start to develop other symptoms, fatigue, potential bowel issues with your digestive tract, throwing up, not being able to keep food down because now your colon is so impacted by what's happened, rapid weight gain, exhaustion, like all things before you start presenting as sick. Once that happens, it's likely a stage 4. We are talking likely late stages, and those are highly difficult to treat. And so that's why young people are dying at such a rate, because we are not supposed to be screened until 45. And so if you have any questions about what is happening, if your bowel habits have changed in any way, no matter what age you are, it needs to be a conversation that you can have with your doctor. It needs to be something that we can be comfortable talking about. I'm not saying you need to go to your next dinner party and start, breaking out all of that information, but your doctor is a safe place. Your doctor knows you poop. Your doctor does not care. Like they need to hear about these things. They are trained to hear about these things. And do not think that just telling your, general practice doctor, your primary care doctor, that is necessarily going to be enough if you feel like something is wrong, because they don't necessarily have the expertise in that area. They need to refer you to somebody, or you need to find somebody who does specialize in it. So the biggest thing that I can tell you to do today, to start doing right now, if you have no symptoms, you are perfectly healthy, you've never thought about anything having to do with poop in your life other than that it's just something that we have to do, please start looking. After you go to the bathroom, every time you stand up, turn around and look. It is so important to have a baseline of what normal is. So anytime you see something that isn't what you usually experience, you're going to know right away, and you will know to go talk to your doctor and at least throw it out there. I heard a story of a woman who passed away recently, who had stage 4 colorectal cancer, and she was sick for months, like had all of these symptoms, and they could not figure out what was wrong with her because she was under 40. They could not possibly think that this was colorectal cancer. And she had been experiencing bleeding for months, but she didn't tell them that. And so if she had told them at some point, oh, also I'm having rectal bleeding, they would have been like, oh, let's check, let's narrow our focus now. And perhaps she could have been caught before she got to stage 4. So it is just so important in so many ways to know our bodies. But colorectal cancer is highly, highly preventable if we can get screened early enough. Highly preventable. It takes about 10 years for a polyp or cancer cells to turn into an actual tumor. That's how long it takes. And in the meantime, they become a polyp that you can find when you do a colonoscopy that they can just snip off. You don't even feel it. There is no downtime. You just have to have a colonoscopy in the first place. So screening for colonoscopy, or screening with colonoscopies, is so powerful and so important. And if you ever think that there is potentially something not right there, you need to push for yourself and for getting something like that. If doctors cannot explain what is going on, that is the best way to either get peace of mind or the help that you need earlier than having it turn into something potentially life-changing.
Advocacy and community, right? You're using your platform and your community to advocate. And I think people underestimate the power of advocacy and advocating for themselves in the doctor's office, and understanding that, yes, sadly, or actually biologically, it's really important. We all poop, turns out. I mean, like when you have a baby, right? You're checking your baby's poop. Like, it's actually not gross. It's a necessity, because if you're not checking, then you have no idea what's going on. But it literally is the guideline. And so somewhere along the way, we got embarrassed about the fact that, like, apparently it's okay to poop when you're a baby, but we're not supposed to poop as we get older. I think it's very, like, absurd when you, like, think about the big picture of it. So I love that you're advocating. It sounds like rectal cancer does not discriminate. It can happen to anyone, regardless of history, medical history, genetics. Am I correct in that statement?
Yeah, I have no family history. I had full genetic testing, and I have no markers for anything. And it is one of the it's on track to becoming the fastest growing cancer, especially in people under 50. So, and they don't know why. They can't explain it, which is the scariest part. So many young people are being affected by this, and we don't, like, healthy people. People think of, you hear colorectal, you think of like it's an old man's disease, or it's somebody who is does not live a healthy lifestyle, or, is battling other health issues. Most of the people that I have talked to, that I have heard stories of, are young, healthy, workout, take care of themselves, would never have thought that this could happen to them. And for some reason it is. So it could happen to any of us.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to know, knowing what you know now, how do you view your life differently than you did before all of this adversity? I mean, there's been a number of different experiences that you've been through. Like, how do you view life after your experiences?
Well, I spent so many years so caught up in my job title, my professional title, how much money I made, how many followers I had on social media, how many people knew who I was. Like all of these things to me measured success. And I am to the point now where success to me is just being here. It is being with my family. It is getting to live a life that is mine, that is quiet, that is boring, that is just surrounded by the things that matter the most to me, which is my family, which is the home that we have created. And success can look so many different ways to people. And I just, my diagnosis gave me permission to really think about what it was that I wanted to do with my life, not knowing how long it was going to last. And I had been, after my daughter was born, I really, really did not want to try to get back into working and figuring out what I was doing and hustle and do all of that. I wanted to be with her. And I didn't think that was an option. I was like, well, no, you have to work. This has always been what you are, who you are. How will people know that you are successful if you stop working? And I got diagnosed, and the one of the first things that entered my mind was, I don't have to go to work now. Like I can just focus on this and I can focus on my daughter. And then when I got through treatment, I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to go back to work, but I just want to be with my daughter. And my cancer therapist, thankfully, was like, no, you don't. If it works for your family that you don't need to work, you don't need to work. And she encouraged me to take at least a year after I finished treatment, after I finished surgery, at least a year to focus on healing, physically, mentally, emotionally, and just be with my family and be doing the things that matter to me. And that's when I realized, wait, I want to be with my daughter right now. This is the only child that we are going to have. This is the only experience we are going to have. I spent so many months of her first year and a half so sick. I don't want to miss anything. And so for me, it took away all of the concerns that I had about, oh, what will people think? And what shouldn't I be doing this? No, I want to do this. I want to be with my daughter right now. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago and more, if this is what I would have been doing and I would have been happy doing it, I would have really questioned your sanity. And this is what is right for me, and this is what is right for our family. And I really don't care how it might look or what other people might think. It doesn't matter. And honestly, nobody's really thinking or caring all that much anyway. Everybody's worried about themselves. So I can just let that go. And am just so grateful to be able to you know, shift my priorities and do what it is that I really want to do.
Your gratitude for being here with us, right? Being here on this planet with your daughter is so clear. And it's interesting because I'm listening to you, and although you've been through a myriad of tumultuous experiences, you survived. You made it through, like, to the other end, and it's like truly beautiful and a miracle in the way you're advocating. And so I I wonder, I'm gonna ask the question, but in hindsight, in looking back, is there any aspect, if you could go back in time, that you would do all over again?
No. The only thing that I would like to go back in time and tell myself to do, because treatment also sent me into menopause immediately. So I went into
Mm.
menopause at 42. And so the only thing that I would do is go back and tell my 20 something self to start picking up some damn weights and stop just doing cardio. That's really the only thing that I would like to go back and redo. And that would be helpful, but that's not really that big of a deal. At this point, I really only believe that if something could have been done better or differently, that would have worked out in a different way. I only know that now because I went through it. So I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have now. I wouldn't be the person that I am now if I hadn't gone through that, if I hadn't gone through the tough times, also the embarrassing times, the things that the dumb choices that we make sometimes that we're like, why did we do that? But we know it. We know that it was maybe not the best because we lived it and we experienced it. And now we have that knowledge because of it. So I don't like to look back and think, oh gosh, if you could just do it again. Even, and this is where it gets tricky for me because had I not been pregnant, had I not had my daughter and had that whole experience, then yes, potentially I would like to go back and redo not telling anybody about my rectal bleeding the moment I saw it. But now knowing that I did survive and I am here, I don't I wouldn't even, I would be afraid to go back and change that too, because I don't know how it would have affected our ability to have our daughter. And so I'm just so grateful that we have her and that I am doing well now. That I'm going to tell everyone else, please speak up the minute you see rectal bleeding. But I have so many mixed feelings about what would have happened if I would have, just because of my pregnancy. But yeah, that's the only thing. But I still I wouldn't change that either because it's gotten us here.
Do you have any parting words that you'd like to share with our listeners?
You know what? You're doing a great job. We are all going, everybody is going through something. Everybody is going through something. And we are told at every turn all the ways that we could improve our lives and all the ways that we could do things better. And, just go onto social media and you will have plenty of people within scrolling a few ways telling you the step-by-step ways to improve this about your life, to do this better, to fix this, to whatever it is. And you're doing a great job. Like none of us really need to be fixed. Most of the things about us do not need to be fixed. They just need some compassion and some empathy and some understanding that this is life and we're all doing it for the first time and we're all trying to figure it out. And even when it feels like you are not doing it well, you're here. You are stronger than you think. And I'm proud of you. I don't know you. I don't have to know you to know that. And I know people who do know you are proud of you. We are all doing our best. And if nobody has told you recently, you're doing a great job.
Laura, I love that. I love that message for everyone, myself included. Thank you so much. No, truly, I really appreciate your words of wisdom. Your advocacy is so incredibly inspirational and educational, and I'm grateful on how you showed up today and how you show up every single day. So thank you.